today's lesson, we're going to be looking at The Great Gatsby, and then we're going to be looking more specifically at the setting and the time frame that took place in, so the Roaring Twenties. So I've got a text on D2L, The Roaring Twenties by Mike Kubik. I'm going to want you to pull that up. Before you watch this video, I need you to have two things done. First thing, I need you to have the opening activity. So that discussion board that I put on Google Classroom, I need you to have that completely finished. So I need you to have posted your answer and responded to your classmate. I want you guys to respond to somebody who doesn't already have a response, because I need everybody to have a question for something we're going to do later on in the class. So the second thing, I need you to have already read this text through once by yourself. I'm not going to read this whole thing to you. I'm going to go through and hit the high points, so I need you guys to have all of the information that I don't hit in this video that you got by reading it. So let's get started. So the first thing I want you guys to notice is these numbers. So anytime you see one of these numbers up at the top, it means that down at the bottom of the page, there is a definition or a note for that word. So you just find the corresponding number, and that's the definition for that word. So anytime you see a number, go look at what that note is, because it's going to give you context that you need to understand what this article is telling you. Next, let's start with this quote. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I want you guys to keep this in mind as we're going through this article, because I think it's going to make a lot of sense once we get deeper into it. So just kind of keep that at the back of your mind. So right here, it says post-World War I. So this is right after World War I, the 1920s. I like to kind of think of it as the cream filling in the middle of an Oreo, which is my favorite part. So you got World War I on one end, where there were food shortages, people were having issues feeding their family, people were being sent off to fight in a war. And then on the other end, you've got the Great Depression, where people are out of jobs, people are losing money. The American dollar is just, the value of the American dollar has just absolutely tanked. So right here in the middle, we've got the Roaring Twenties. And I think it's interesting that we see this period of like partying and rebellion sandwiched by these two periods of great struggle. So we see right here, Americans celebrated their country's new prestige, strength, and prosperity. So we just won World War I. And when you win a world war, you tend to celebrate. So our country now is looking super strong on the world stage. We're doing really well as far as, what we look like to other countries. And so our citizens wanted to celebrate that. Their sons are coming home from war. Their husbands are coming home from war. They're finally getting back to a sense of normal. So right here, the title, A Period of Rebellion, that is important. So if we look, we've got the 19th Amendment. This is an interesting one. Boycotting prohibition. So prohibition, if we look down here, because it's got a little number 9, a nationwide ban on the production, importation, transportation, and sale of alcoholic beverages. So if you are boycotting something not being allowed, that would mean that you're partaking in it. So that means that in order to boycott prohibition, people were producing, selling, and consuming alcohol. Now, I want us to think, when things are produced illegally, that means that they don't have to go through any of the safety checkpoints that we have. So a lot of the alcohol that was being produced and consumed during this time wasn't really safe to be drinking, but people didn't care because they just wanted to have an alcoholic beverage. And so we saw a lot of consequences from this. And people's decision-making during this time wasn't always the best decisions. So we even saw U.S. senators, congressmen, and high government officials breaking this law. So if they're breaking the law themselves, it stands to reason that they're going to be a lot more likely to look the other way when other people break the law. So then we get things like bootleggers. Bootleggers like Al Capone. I'm sure you guys have heard of Al Capone. He's super famous. This was the time when Al Capone was really in business. And these bootleggers were the ones who were making and supplying the liquor. The illegal liquor, let's remember that. It is not legal at this time to produce and sell alcohol. So the popular music during this time is important because music really defined an era. And it still does today. I want you guys to think about when you think of the 80s, you think of 80s music. When you think of the 90s, you think of 90s music, NSYNC, Britney Spears. And I'm sure in 30 years, when we look back at right now, we'll think of the 2020s music. So you've got jazz, American foxtrot, Viennese, that's the right word, waltz, and Argentine tango. That's a lot of different music genres. And that's only what's going on upstairs. Underground, we've got speakeasies. So upstairs, there's a jazz club where people are listening to jazz. You've got a jazz singer on the stage. And then in the back, there's a back door that you knock 3 times on or whatever, and they let you in. And in the back, they've got alcohol, maybe another performer back there. It's like a second secret club that you can only get into if you know the secret handshake, because back there, they're breaking the law. And then we've got all these great things happening, like the cross-Atlantic flight of Charles Lucky Lindy Lindbergh. We've got a ton of people winning money. Wouldn't that be nice? People winning $500, $200. But here's the thing. Americans were happily spending money they had to save because of wartime shortages. And there's a plethora of new marvels to buy. Here's the thing. When you spend a ton of money, you don't have a ton of money left in savings. So they were saving this money because they didn't know when the war was going to end, and they needed to have it. Now they're spending all of that. They're spending their cushion, so when the Great Depression happens, there's nothing for the citizens of America to fall back on. They didn't know that the good times would last, like it says here, and no mood to worry whether the good times would last. They had no way of knowing that the Great Depression was about to happen, so they spent all of the money that they had saved up to take care of their family. So when the Great Depression happened, they had nothing to fall back on. And then we get to the president. We've got Harding and Coolidge. These two are referred to as the slumbering presidents. So I think you can imagine by that name, they didn't get a whole lot done. So it says, one lurking danger was the great debts of thousands of communities from coast to coast who overinvested in public projects which they expected to pay off in the future. They did not. So these communities made public projects. So like, let's imagine a park that cost $1 million. And they said, we're going to pay that back in 10 years. Well, in 5 years, the Great Depression happens. And they can't pay that back because they don't have any money. So this really, it set up a series of dominoes that led to the Great Depression. And then after these two presidents, we have President Hoover. Now, he recognized that the stock market and everything and the economy was in danger. He knew that something bad was about to happen, but it was really too late for him to do anything. By that point, somebody had already tipped over the first domino, and he was just playing catch up, trying to make sure that the rest of the dominoes didn't fall. So there wasn't a whole lot he could have done to stop this. So we've got, just an absolutely insane period of time where you've got prohibition and you've got women's suffrage and all of these things happening at once, and it's just this powder keg that explodes into the Great Depression. So the Great Depression, I'm sure you guys have heard about the Great Depression in your history class. And when you were talking about it, I'm sure you talked about Black Thursday, and that is when the stock markets were just tanked. If you guys don't know, when you put money into the stock market, there's no guarantee that you're going to get it back. You hope that the stocks go up and you make money, but the stocks could drop all the way down and you could lose basically everything that you put in. So a bunch of people started pulling their stocks out of the stock market, and all of a sudden the stocks crashed, and the people who left their stocks in the stock market, they didn't have anything left. If you had $100 in the stock market and 100 people pull out their $100, so all of a sudden your $100 is worth a cent. So that's what happened. And so they've spent their cushion on cars and fancy things. And now the money that they invested into the stock market, hoping that stocks were going to go up, that money's gone. In September 1931, 305 banks closed doors. Within 2 years, the number reached more than 2,000. 2,000 banks closing their doors. That's insane. So I want us to really think about and remember this when we're reading The Great Gatsby. I want us to remember where we are in history and what's going on in the world, because that really informs a lot of the things that happen. So what I want you to do today, I want you to write 5 to 7 paragraphs, and there's a prompt for this on Google Classroom that you can go look at. I want you to write 5 to 7 sentences, 5 to 7 sentences about what you think, if you think the time period that we're in is going to affect things like the way characters make decisions and the plot and all of those things. How do you think that the time period that we're in is going to affect that? Remember yesterday we read we watched the trailer for The Great Gatsby, and we made predictions about what we thought was going to happen. So go ahead and pull out that graphic organizer that you made yesterday. Use those predictions and this information to write this paragraph. After you've written your paragraph, I want you to go back to the discussion board that we did for our opening activity, and I want you to answer the question that you got asked using the information that you have now. So that's all I've got for you today. I will talk to you guys tomorrow, and I hope you guys have a great day.